Okay, class, this is the video on the Unit 16 seventh chords. And just as an introduction, a seventh chord in music is a triad, which you guys already know. You know the four basic triads, that has a seventh added to it. And the triad, of course, is 1, 3, and 5. So if you add another note on top, it's always in odd numbers. It will be a 7. So whenever you hear someone saying they're playing a seventh chord, G7, that's a G triad with an additional note added on top, the seventh of that from the bottom note. So, but instead of being 4 seventh chords like you might expect with 4 different triads, there are 5 different distinct seventh chords. There is dominant 7, major 7, minor 7, and then a half diminished 7 and a diminished 7 chord, or fully diminished. In the book I just put diminished 7 and did not put half diminished, but fully diminished is sometimes what you'll hear as well. So diminished chords have 2 varieties. All the rest are the same as your triads. Now what I'm going to do on the right side is I'm going to draw each one out, reflecting what is on the page. So the first triad I'm going to do is, actually I'm going to go, instead of doing the dominant 7 chord, which is the top one in your book, I'm going to go to the major 7 first, because it's just like a major scale. So then we're going to zoom in on what I'm doing here. I'm going to start on the note E. And as you know, if I'm going to think in the key of E major, excuse me, to get a E major triad, I have to think about the key of E major. I'm going to put the notes on. I've got E, it's kind of hard to write this way, E, G, and B. But in the key of E major, as you guys know, there are 4 sharps, F, C, G, and D. So the G needs to be sharp. That's an E major triad right now. If I add a 7th, and as you guys know, you just stack the notes up, 1, 3, 5, and then another line would be 7. So now what I'm looking for is, what kind of note am I going to put as a 7th here? And this chord that we're writing right now is E major 7. So that means I have an E major triad, because the triad is major, and the 7th, the degree on the top, from the bottom note to the top note, will also be a major 7 interval. So an E major 7 is an E major triad, E triad, major triad, plus a major 7 interval. And so if I think of the key of E major, I have all the information I need. Again, in E major, it's F, C, G, and D. And so that D right now is not a sharp, which means it would not be in the key of E major or would not be a major 7. So I'm going to put a sharp on the D, and if I have that on there, I will have an E major 7 chord, an E major triad with a major 7 interval from the lowest note to the 7th. That creates E major 7. And that's always consistent. So a major scale will produce for you a naturally occurring major 7 chord. Now the next 7th chord, I'm going to go back up to the top of the page, and it's called a dominant 7 chord. And a dominant 7 chord is a chord that's also major, major triad, but it has a minor 7th on the top. So an easy conversion for you would be, all right, you put all 4 notes on. You know it's a major triad, so we're starting on E again. So you're going to use G sharp to make a major triad. There's your major triad already. And this time it's going to be E7. So when you see a chord that's listed like that, that is a dominant 7 chord, we call it. So it's a major triad plus a minor 7 interval. Well, we know that the E major 7 has a major 7 interval. So the only difference between these two chords is that it's the same triad, E major, but the 7th now is not going to be a major 7 interval, but a minor 7 interval. And the way we make a minor 7 interval is we take by a half step lower a major 7. So D sharp then would become D natural. So only unless you had that sharp sign in front of the D in a previous measure, you would then use that natural sign. I'm doing that now, but if you didn't have anything else there, then you could just leave it as a D natural, and you would have an E dominant 7, E triad with a minor 7 added. So chords like A7, D7, B7, those are all dominant 7 chords. If I say E major 7, A major 7, G major 7, they have major 7s in them. So those two are very closely related, but of course the difference in the 7th itself. Then the next chord is a minor 7 chord. And the easy way to think about that is, okay, if I have a minor 7 chord, the minor is talking about the triad and the 7th. So both of them are minor. So if I write an E minor 7, I'm going to write that here. So let's think about that. These both are major triads. So how do I make a major triad turn into a minor triad? I will make the 3rd lower. So that means this G will no longer be G sharp, but G natural. That's the only difference between a major and a minor triad. So now this is a minor triad. That's E minor. An E minor 7th also has a minor 7 interval between the lowest note and the highest note, the highest 7th. So that means that between those two intervals, E and D, is a minor 7. And of course we already know that E to D natural is a minor 7 because it's the same as the previous chord. So we're going to keep that as D natural. So an E minor 7 is an E minor triad plus a minor 7 interval. So again, an E minor 7 means that both are minor. Minor triad and minor 7 interval. Okay? And now we get to the diminished chords, which can be a little bit more complicated. But the reason I'm going in this order is that we're going from the most expanded, major 7, to a little bit lower with a dominant 7, and then a little bit lower with a minor 7, because now we have two minor intervals. The diminished triad, or the diminished 7 rather, starts off this way. If I want to write a diminished triad, first I'm going to write the triad itself, and we know that a diminished triad is minor 3rd, which is E to G. We already know that E to G is a minor 3rd. But the 5th has to also be lowered, right? It has to be a diminished 5th. So the B has to be a B flat. That is an E diminished triad. If I add a 7th, there's going to be a special name for that chord. So here's the diminished triad, and then I'm going to add a 7th. This chord is now going to be called E half diminished. That means it's a diminished triad plus a minor 7 interval. So it's the same as a minor chord. So you already know that between E and D, which is a 7th, that is a minor 7 interval. So if I leave that as D natural, that chord is now E half diminished. They call it half diminished because you're going to see in the next chord I'm going to lower this even further. So it's diminished triad, minor 7 is half diminished. Sometimes they'll write the chord like this. They'll use a diminished sign with a 7, and you got to put the 7, and then they'll put a slash through it. That means half diminished. And then the final 7th chord is the most compressed. It is a diminished triad, same thing, but the 7th now, when we add the D, now has to be lower than a minor 7th. And if you remember correctly, if you go from minor and you lower minor even further, it becomes diminished. So that now is a diminished 7th. From E to D has all the way been compressed all the way from a major 7, D sharp, all the way down to D flat, which is a diminished 7. So an E fully diminished 7 chord has a diminished triad plus a diminished 7. So if you see E fully diminished or E diminished 7, that means both parts are diminished, the triad and the 7th. And that looks like this oftentimes. Degree sign, which is for diminished, and that. That's fully diminished or E diminished. This is E half diminished. So what I'm going to do is do a synopsis of what the triad is with the 7th, which will help you. So major 7. A major 7 chord equals a major triad. So I'm going to put that down as the triad that it exists, and then the 7 that you have to add, the 7th. Major triad, major 7. A dominant 7. Usually the symbol is just 7, but we still call it dominant. Will be major triad, minor 7. A minor 7 chord sometimes looks like this, minus 7 too. Will be a minor triad and a minor 7. A diminished or a half diminished looks like this. Will be diminished triad. You notice that I'm using the D sign. And a minor 7 as the 7th. And then finally we have fully diminished. That's a diminished triad and a diminished 7. So those are the 5 different types of 7th chords. That's all we have. So again, notice that we have, yes, major, 2 major triads with different 7s, only 1 minor triad with 7s, and then 2 different kinds of diminished triads. Notice that we have not included, I have not included an augmented 7 chord, because generally we don't discuss those particular 7th chords. Those are more special. Okay, and then in the next installment, I'm going to show you what those 7th chords are in a major scale, what they would be, just like we learned the major scale triads. Okay? Okay, so now the next installment here is the what the 7th chords are in a major scale. And there's an order to what they are, and they're always consistent. And one thing you will notice is that the fully diminished will be missing. The fully diminished only occurs in a harmonized harmonic minor scale, which I don't even have in my textbook. That would be a little bit more advanced. I only go up to major scale with 7s. So if you'll notice, if I had a major scale and I just used its key signature, this is C major now. Every one of these notes has no accidentals, not one. So that means when I stack them up, they produce chords just like the triads that we produced before. So in the major scale, we had C major triad, D minor triad, E minor triad, F major triad, G major triad, A minor triad, and B diminished. That's what's actually underneath those chords without adding the seventh to it. Obviously here I have a seventh added to every one of these chords. And when you add that 7, the first chord, chord number 1, will always be major 7. That's what gets produced with the key signature. No matter what, if you have a major key signature and you produce a chord from the very first scale degree and build it up, it will become major 7. Chord number 2 will always be minor 7. Chord 3, minor 7. Chord 4, a major 7 chord. 5, a dominant 7 chord. That's a major triad with a minor 7. That's what is naturally produced. Chord number 6 will be minor 7. And chord number 7 will be a half diminished chord. That's always the order of the chords in a major scale if you produce 7th chords. Major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished 7. And what I did was I broke it down into which ones are major 7s, 1 and 4. Which ones are minor 7s, 2, 3, and 6. There's only one dominant 7, and it's always in the 5 position. And then the 7th is the only one that is a half diminished 7. One of the reasons, just to give you an aside, and I would have done this in a lecture, is the reason we call it dominant 7. In classical music, we have names for every position. It's tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, which is 5, and then submediant, and then we have leading tone. So this position right here, 5, is always called the dominant position, or a dominant. This is tonic. And so in all major scales, the dominant chord always becomes a dominant 7, which has that minor 7 in it. That's where the name comes from if you're wondering why sometimes you hear it referred to as a dominant 7. Okay, then the next installment will be the last, which is a demonstration of what those chords sound like, because you do have a description of what they look like in your book. And then I'll just play each one so that you hear it. And of course, the diagrams are already in the book. Okay, here are the 7th chords played on the guitar, so at least you can see the reference to the sound and what it looks like on the instrument. I'm just going to go through each of the 5 as they're put in your book. Okay, so you'll see that there's 5 different chords based on the 6th string. And the first one I have is a dominant 7 chord. That's a full bar all the way across, and then with your 3rd finger and your 2nd finger. It looks like this. That's what it should sound like. That means placed anywhere on the fingerboard is a dominant 7 chord. And I put it on the 1st fret. So it ends up being an F dominant 7 chord. The next chord I give you is major 7. And the fingerings are 1, 3, 4, and then 2. And it does look like this. And the thing about this is that there is that 5th string that's not being played. So if you play this as a chord with a pick, you have to kind of mute this 5th string. I'm muting it. If you play with your fingers, then you don't have to worry about it because you just avoid that 5th string altogether. This is a major 7 anywhere. The root of your chord, or the name of your chord, is wherever your 1st finger is. That names the chord itself. So this is G, major 7. The next chord I give you is G minor 7, and that's just a bar just straight across. If you use the 5th string, in this case I didn't have the 5th string indicated, but I'm going to give you a new one. If you want to use that 5th string, then you would put your 3rd finger on the 5th fret to make it G minor 7. That's a G minor 7. chord, if you play that anywhere. Same thing is going to be minor 7. It's named by where your first finger is indicated. Okay. Then you have half diminished. This one is where your second finger is placed. I'm going to do a G half diminished because that's what I have in the book. It's second finger, third finger, fourth finger, and then your first finger goes on the second fret. Special sound as well. If you're playing with a pick, you got to mute that fifth string. I'm muting it with my second finger, kind of crossing it over. If I'm just playing with my fingers, again, no problem, because I just don't play that string. So this is a half diminished chord. It's named by where my second finger is. This is G half diminished. If I want to turn that into a fully diminished, it's interesting because the pattern looks like it might not suggest this, but you will put a bar on the second fret. Your first finger is going to cover the first, it's going to cover from the first string all the way to the fourth string. 1, 2, 3, 4, barring. And then your third finger will go on the third string like this. So then, if you played with a pick again, you're muting that second string. This is a G fully diminished 7. I have it as G diminished 7. That usually means it's fully diminished unless it says half. Okay? So, if I did the 6-string chords, and I happen to start on the G, which I'm going to do. I'm going to make every one of these based on G. I'm going to do the first chord that I would like to do in the sequence is a major 7. G major 7. And then G dominant 7. So I'm going to play that bar chord, full bar chord all the way across. Then I'm going to make it minor 7. Make it half diminished. Now I'm going to make it fully diminished. So just not to confuse you when you're looking at the book, when I'm playing all these chords one after another, the preference would be to do major 7 first, and then dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished, fully diminished. So major 7. Dominant 7. Minor 7. Half diminished 7. Fully diminished 7. That's what it sounds like if I do them all one after another. I am using my fingers, so I'm not even touching the 5th string on several of those chords, most of them actually. Okay, now you have the same equivalent on the 5th string, and the chords look different because of the tuning of the guitar. So I'm going to do it based on what is in the book first, okay, so that'll make it easier for you to follow. The first chord that I put in based on the 5th string was a dominant 7 chord. And that's a bar all the way across, just like you did before, but this time it's the 3rd finger and the 4th finger, the pinky, and it looks like this. So wherever I play that chord, the sound of dominant 7 is produced. Right now, my first finger covers the name of the chord. This is 5th string, 1st fret, B flat. So this is a B flat dominant 7. Now in the book, the next chord is a major 7. In the future, I'm going to change that order. But now I'm going to add my second finger to what already is a dominant 7, right there. Second finger goes on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and it sounds like this. That's B flat major 7. This can be moved. Okay, dominant 7 without the 2nd finger. Major 7, adding it. Okay, now I'm going to stay there because I do have that in the book for the minor 7. Notice that the 2nd finger now is going to go to the 2nd string, 2nd fret, and pinky is not there. And That is minor 7, barring all the way through. That's B flat, excuse me, minor 7. Minor 7 fingering based on the 5th string, B flat. Then I do a half diminished chord, and it's produced off the 5th string, 3rd fret. That's C half diminished, C. You can see the fingering. 1, 3, 2, 4. Definitely I want you to use the book as a reference so you can see how the fingers are. I know I'm going a little quickly here. This is C half diminished. That's a half diminished no matter where you play it. Based on the 5th string, 1st finger, that's C. This is C half diminished. The next one would be C fully diminished. So you do have to move your fingers differently. 2nd finger now becomes the main note on C. That's a fully diminished chord no matter where you place it. The fully diminished is determined by where your 2nd finger is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on C. And I'm going to do a sequence like this. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished 7, fully diminished 7. Notice that this will always be my root tone, whereas before we had the G on the 6th string. So C is going to be my root. Okay? So major 7 looks like this. If you can get your major 7 chords, get the look of it, and then I release my 2nd finger, dominant 7. Minor 7, the 2nd finger goes to a different place, 2nd string instead, 4th finger comes up, that's minor 7, half diminished, and then fully diminished. I'm going to play each one of those, and the only notes I'm going to play are the 4 strings in between the 6th string and the 1st. I'm not playing the 6th or the 1st. Okay, so I'm just doing 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd. And you can do that with a pick as well. C major 7 first. C dominant 7. C minor 7. C half diminished 7. Play each of the chords sequentially. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished 7, fully diminished 7. Because then what you're doing is you're going from the most spread out sounds to the most compressed. Same thing with the 6th string. It was G major 7, G dominant 7, G minor 7, G half diminished 7, G fully diminished 7. And that's all the chords. Those are really important chords, 7th chords. If you want to play any type of jazz, you have to know at least your 5 different types of 7th chords. And then of course any of the other numbers are used the same way. You'll hear 9, 11, 13. That's the next chapter and that's the next class. So hope you understand, and I think you will, this chapter, and that's the end of the 7th chords.